What's up guys, YvensB here. Video lighting is becoming increasingly affordable and useful. As a photographer or as a service provider, you should be getting more and more into video or motion as the market can demand it. Both stills and motions are really required on set. A tool like the $189 Ambitful FL80 watt COB LED light can help you get there. So let's see into this review how this little tool can help you get further and further into your motion career. Let's get started. So full disclosures before we get started. I received the Ambitful FL80 watt for review and some accessories. I was not paid to do this review, and the only money that was exchanged was for me to pay the custom and taxes I did to receive this unit. Thank you, Trudeau. After this review, I get to keep the light. But as you will see by watching this entire video, this will not impact the review or any comments that I make upon the FL80 from Ambitful. So, as I said earlier, you want to get into video, right? The LED market changed a lot in the last few years. Form factors that we used to see dramatically change for smaller and way more affordable solutions, and also very practical. The Ambitful FL80 watt LED is part of that wave. A few years ago, I received from DNO Lighting an LED light panel that boasted 180 watt of power. It was huge and it was fun. It's actually powerful enough to actually light stills without having the ISO punch to the roof, like even, I don't have to top off, like even 400. You can check out my review of the unit here. But a light from this size with a panel form factor that is kind of a problem, as you cannot modify the light as you wish with light modifiers, and its large size makes it really difficult to work with in some applications. One, transport is really difficult, and two, modifying it is even more difficult into some very creative solutions. But going back to the FL80, what's even more impressive is when you compare it to a light like the old Godox SL60, a classic in terms of really video light. In terms of size, the Ambitful 80 is significantly smaller while being more powerful in terms of pure wattage, again with some caveats. And also the creative functions are actually more in-depth versus the SL80, which has basically one function, which is to light. Part of the reason why is you can probably cram more beads now than before. Let's say if you compare the beads from the FL80 to the SL60, you'll see a big difference since the Ambitful FL80 is a bi-colored RGB light versus the SL60, which is a simple LED light. And speaking of RGB, and this is probably why you're here, the red, green, and blue functions can be controlled in two ways: HSI and RGBCW. If you didn't know, the HSI function stands for hue, saturation, and intensity controls. We also have the standard CCT function, and this is where you probably spend most of your time if you're just trying to create a very simple light for your clients. HSI, as you figured it out, controls three functions that I just named. But really, HSI is pretty much standard on any RGB light. The control is similar to what can be found in those smaller panels like the one I reviewed here. The other way to control the RGB spectrum on the FL80 here is to use the RGBCW, which stands for, as you guessed it, red, blue, green, cold, and warm. The function is a little more precise to know that exact RGB value that you want by letting you add red, blue, and green to the amount that you want to on a scale of 0 to 100. After you're done, you can then adjust the coldness or warmth of the light by adjusting the C and W function. The Ambitful or the FL80 has an HSI built in with a color gamut going from red to blue and everything in between. This is great if you're looking to create some scenes or you want to be a little dramatic, or he's crazy. So you saw the lighting change that I made with my cell phone. Let's look into that. So controlling colors, or actually the light itself, is fairly easy with the device itself. But if you need to make your life truly easy, skip all of these controls and you can get the app. Yes, I know, I'm lucky myself. Another app on my phone, I hate it, but actually this one is actually pretty good. I tested the FL80 app on an Android phone, a Pixel 3 XL to be precise, and the connection was fast and responsive. The app is simple enough, there's nothing really complicated about it, and is well built to adjust the light quickly when you're on the fly. The app does require a Bluetooth connection, so keep that in mind for your battery management of your phone. The Bluetooth connection can be here seen on the display also of the unit. A little side note, I know there's grouping functions that is possible with that light. Unfortunately, I don't have many more than one, so it's very difficult for me to test these grouping functions. If ever you did, let me know in the comments if it did work for you. But as of now, I did not test grouping functions if you have multiple of this Ambitful FL80 light. But as a reminder, you can again control everything in the display. And speaking of the display, the panel includes most of the information to require with two simple knobs. Both knobs can be clicked to access different menu items. The right knob changes the mode to HSI, RGBCW, and CCT, and the FX function or special functions. The menu is also very easy to navigate and adjust if you need to do some quick adjustments. There are also 10 gimmicky pre-cooked special effects settings to simulate ambient lighting. They offer some level of control as to the frequency or how fast the actual affecting of the pattern and the lighting output, but who cares about that? The Ambitful also has a CCT mode, which is where you'll spend most of your time in my opinion. CCT stands for Correlated Color Temperature. CCT is essentially a gauge of how yellow or blue the color of the light will emitted from light bulb appears. On the app and also on the display panel of the light, you can also control the amount of magenta and green emitted from the light, which is really awesome. The light is set so you can get the Kelvin temperature ranging from the very warm 2800 to the very cold 10,000 K. And if you wonder why this is great in my opinion, having control over the light color cast allows you to change the background color. I won't dive too much into the details, but here's a start with me setting the FL80 and my camera white balance to the very warm 3000K and see what happens to the gray background of my home studio. The same can be done also in reverse, putting it at 10,000, like very cold, and reversing it. So you can change the Kelvin temperature and all, but is it accurate? So for this portion of the test, I tested the light. I've used the Lumo Power to measure its color and power output. The chart that you see on screen kind of tells you the whole story about the light and its color accuracy. So the FL80 in terms of power doesn't have a focusing spot like the Aperture 60X. Instead, the light has a flood lamp, which isn't taking full advantage of the 80 available watt inside of real-life applications. At 5500K, which is the most important light temperature for your daylight balance applications for photos and videos, the FL80 measures at the following f-stops at 24 frames per second. You can clearly see them in the graph. And this was using the bare bulb not to influence its power output. Also for good measure, I tested it with a standard reflector, and of course you'll see a spike of power since the light, instead of being in flood-like, is being focused into a very narrow beam. In sum, or if you read 0% of the graph, while it's not quite as accurate as its most expensive peers, this is $189, the readings from the Lumo Power indicate a variant about 300 to 400 kelvins from the settings that you put it in. So the question is always, and will always remain, are you willing to pay more than double for a little more precision? The Aperture LS60X is $419, and this unit right here is only $189. So this is the decision you have to make if ever you're really precise about your color temperatures. If you're on a budget, simply to make sure you measure the color output coming from your light with something like the Lumo Power, which is here. After you're done, it's quite easy to adjust with the app and on your camera. And in terms of power, the Ambitful offers control that go from 0 to 100% with small 1% increment, which is very welcome for those like me who really like to nail in those lighting metrics. And for those who are a little crazy and like to use this without any modifiers, here's the light pattern that you get out of the light directly, again without any modifiers. Again, I can't test all the modifiers out there because it really depends on what you have, but here's the one with the softbox provided by Ambitful. So how does this light fare in terms of build quality? Well, first of all, it's made of metal, which is pretty good. It's aluminum. It's not the best aluminum, but it's good. But I did run into a few issues when I was testing and using that light. But first, a few good things. See, the FL80 light is built to be similar to its Chinese competitor, the Aperture LS60X. It has an open top where you can see the heat sink and the fan. Like mentioned before, the FL80 does not have a focusing Fresnel, so that's one big negative. Instead, you'll find an L bracket that holds the light and has a nice grippy tooth, so you can adjust the light height or whatever angle you want, and gives you maximum flexibility in order to light any scene the way you want to. The FL80 comes with an array of available accessories that you can modulate if you decide to invest into that unit. So basically, whenever you go and purchase it, you can actually choose which kit is really interesting to you. Of course, the price will vary by your selection. So by default, you can power the unit with a small adapter that comes included with any packages you get with the FL80. Or you can actually also go on location wirelessly with a D-tap/V-mount battery. The power receiver is smartly placed under the block, so basically right here, so it does not interfere with the operations and you won't get your cable twisted in the long run. I left the adapter plugged in for 2 days and the plug did not fall, so kudos. The V-mount battery that the FL80 uses are the classic NP-F970. Here you can charge them using batteries at the same time, which is great. So if you know that, let's say that you need to charge your batteries, but you are on set, you can plug them in, let them charge, use the light at the same time, and go with handheld movement afterwards using the D-tap batteries. Note that the unit requires 2 batteries to operate versus other models that can only require 1. It's a little negative, but it is the way it is. When testing on the field, I did notice some flickering when I let the unit power by the battery. It occurred once every 30 minutes or so not too frequent, but it did happen. My guess is that the battery was probably dying and was at its end spot and was basically giving me indication that it was not powering correctly. I haven't noticed the same flickering issue when powered through DC. So the kit that the Ambitful team sent to me included a small round softbox with a grid. The softbox is light and useful, but it's the type of softbox that requires pressure in order to clip its parts, basically to make the rods bend. And I always dislike this form factor, as I'm always terrified that I'm gonna break something or in the modifier or the clips. I said earlier that I encountered some issues, so for the next phase of this review, please keep in mind that I'm really sensitive to noise. It really bothers me. So first things first was the fan noise. When I'm testing and taking down notes on a specific product, I usually have the light open and next to me to quickly test something, but in this case, I could hear the fan constantly, even at an ambient temperature of 23 degrees, or for you American folks, 73 Fahrenheit, aka not that hot. There was a rattling sound constantly, and it was so constant that I went out to buy a decibel recorder just to see how much sound was coming or how much noise was coming from the unit. Listen to the sound of the fan noise, FL80 with a recorder. In order to make sure I wasn't going nuts, after testing I realized the fan wasn't louder than the floor noise in my house or here. The floor noise in my house was about 40 decibels. I then opened the unit 10 inches away from the meter and measured an additional 2 or 3 decibels. In ultimate terms, it's not much, but something to note and that I really heard whenever I was testing the unit. With all of that said, if you're very sensitive to sound accuracy, you can dock some points on the FL80. But again, another reminder, it's $189, so you don't expect the same performance as something that costs double or more. As to my current field test, I haven't noticed it much with my recordings on a lav mic, this one here. I truly love the fact that this light, like the 60D, uses a YvensB mount. That means that all my available modifiers are available to this LED light. While it's difficult to know that what was the reason behind it, and maybe it's the way it was built, I struggled to lock in and remove different modifiers without using a scary amount of strength or prying through some parts. I found this really cringing. After taking off and placing back correctly a spring that was problematic, all seemed to connect well, and I also relayed my comments to Ambitful for both sound and balance mount issues. Other than that, again, the light is made of solid metal, the parts fits well, not too many plastic parts, which is good, but it's not weatherproof, so do not go outside with it in beating rain or freezing cold. You've been warned. So, to sum it up, what are my overall impressions of the FL80? To sum it up, it's actually a fun tool and fun light for video enthusiasts like me that are on a budget or beginning to explore more creative solutions. I wish some of the build quality, like the fan noise and the balance mount, would be right off the box, but I think it can be improved very easily with, let's say, better parts, like a better fan, for example. While this was an issue, the FL80 is a great budget-friendly contender to the Aputure 60X if you're looking into getting into more video light. I used the FL80 to fill some of the talking head portions of my last behind-the-scenes video that you can check out here, and also filmed a client video shoot, and I find it quite useful, and honestly, it did serve me well, and the form factor, the fact that it's small and fits into a tiny bag, is really awesome. The RGB color function and amount of power you get from the FL80 is also great for its tiny size. since everything, like I said, fits into a small duffel bag. Also the balance mount, really awesome. A creative lighting artist like yourself can actually do a lot of things with the FL80 if ever you push that light hard enough. So for the music video artist or the guerrilla filmmaker, this could be a good option to have in your bag if ever you're looking into just popping up something very quickly. For the documentary filmmaker, if you end up using the FL80, you can do like I do and use either the light as a kicker to avoid letting the fan noise distort your sound if you use a boom mic, or just cut short and use a lav mic. So that was exhausting, and I hope you enjoyed this thoroughly nerdy look at the FL80. And if you like this video, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe for more. Actually, if you want to check out the actual FL80, please make sure you go into the description below so you can find links to this unit. This has been YvensB, Montreal content creator and portrait photographer, and I'm wishing you happy shooting, good luck, and together, let's light the world. Cheers.